I think we have a pretty ambitious target here in this video of defeating the problem of evil. So we're just going to dive right into it. So do you have any general considerations you want to talk about when we're looking at the problem of evil?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is to sort of tell a short story of how I got here, because I just to let you know, I couldn't have gotten here without other people's help. So Tim Howard is one partner of mine. We're sort of like philosophical partners, and we talk a lot on the phone about these issues. And me and him sort of work through it together. And we had to both sort of read a lot of the philosophical literature on this. I think one of the main reasons, we wanted to take a more, we wanted to be honest with the evidence, right? So the problem of evil is like the biggest objection to theism. Like if you ask any ordinary atheist or agnostic about, why they don't believe God exists or why they think, that God is not all good or something, it's going to be the problem of evil. Like the problem of evil is like the number one problem for theism, right? It's been around for thousands of years. So, this objection is not necessarily new. What is new, however, is sort of the new formalizations of the argument, right? And so, as I was looking, as me and Tim were researching this, we had to be honest with the evidence, because at first, my sort of approach prior to this was I took the approach of Clay Jones, and Clay Jones's theodicy is, I think, pretty good for the most part when it comes to moral evil, but it's not very good when it comes to like natural evil or any other like evolutionary evils. So I had to like change my perspective, right? And so I had to like, if I wanted to be honest with the evidence, right? If I wanted to, look at the problem of evil in this sort of in the objective way possible, I had to like actually go into the literature and look at all the different versions that exist, right? Early on, I started off with this. Now, these aren't just problem evil arguments. There's also other arguments, but mostly problem evil stuff, right? So most of the arguments in here are going to be problem evil arguments. And then, of course, you have J.L. Mackie, which I read this probably twice now. And, he presents his logical, the logical version, the problem evil. So I had to, when I first started off, my sort of view was that that evil is evidence against God. That evil at least has some weight, or at least that, my general sort of view that I took was, okay, evil is evidence against theism, right? And that, I just thought that the evidence for theism would sort of outweigh it, right? So I took this sort of outweighing approach where it's like, okay, even if evil is like evidence against theism, it's not strong enough to like outweigh sort of the probability, right? That started to change, however, when I started reading, like, there was this one paper by Robert Bass. It's called Inscrutable Evils, and he uses a Bayesian calculation. Now, just to be clear, even before this, I didn't necessarily agree with the way that he did the probabilities, but basically what his argument was that even if you gave theism a 99% probability or prior probability, that evil would still outweigh theism. So then basically evil, at least inscrutable evils, was sort of like the amount of inscrutable evils would be enough to sort of tip against theism, right? Now, of course, again, even before I came to the conclusion I do now, I didn't necessarily buy his argument, because I didn't really agree with the way that he did the probabilities, but I could sort of understand, like, okay, an atheist, I could see why, okay, as an atheist, you could sort of conclude, even if you have all this evidence for theism, evil just sort of outweighs it, right? So I had to be honest, right? I had to like look into the data, I had to look into the literature. Okay, what are these philosophers saying? What are these atheist philosophers saying? And then also, what are the responses, right, from the theistic side, right? So me and Tim, we had to like go through a lot of stuff, and there's different approaches, right? So there's Clay Jones's approach, which is a sort of Augustine theodicy. Then there's also a skeptical theist theodicy, or not a theodicy, but skeptical theism is the idea that we can't really know, right? And then there's also other sort of approaches, like the Molinist. I know William Lane Craig has done some work on the problem of evil. So there's a lot of views on this, right? There's different approaches. So we had to like be careful in how we would approach it, right? And see what is the best approach for a theist to take, right? And we wanted to make sure, I think most importantly, is we wanted to make sure that, whatever answer we come up with, that it would sort of make sure that, if we had to present a theodicy, then it had to be good enough so that it would not, like decrease the prior probability of the hypothesis. So basically, you don't want to like build stuff in, right? And I feel like what Clay Jones's stuff did is, I think that he has to build in a lot of stuff. So he has to build in a fall. He has to build in, sort of Christian story. I think those are very problematic, right? And so I had to look elsewhere for a sort of answer, right? And the answer that I came to was, well, I was quite surprised. Me and Tim were quite surprised when we reached this conclusion, but basically the problem of evil doesn't work at all. So it doesn't have any sort of evidential weight at all. Now I know that is an extreme position. So I know that most apologists, at least that I've seen, they sort of grant the problem of evil. So they'll say, that it can work in some sense, right? But that, the evidence for theism sort of outweighs it. My approach, at least my conclusion on this, is that the problem of evil doesn't work at all. So it doesn't even have any evidential weight at all, right? And there's a few, I give, 4 main reasons why. We'll get into those, but there are reasons why I think that. And, hopefully today I could sort of present those reasons. So yeah, I guess that's the general story. Basically, we started off with, a fall theodicy. Then we worked through the literature, and then finally we came to a point where basically it's not a problem anymore. And my conclusion now is, of course, that I don't think the problem of evil works at all, like not even in an evidential sense. So the evidential probability is just 0 at that point. I know that, again, that's an extreme position, but I had to be honest with what I was looking at. And so that's what I came to.